Hi, welcome back. This is our third video for introducing lino and woodblock printing techniques. In this video, I just wanted to share with you some tips that are designed to make it a little bit easier potentially to begin cutting your lino tile to prepare your design for printing. A part of the intent is also, of course, to discuss some simple safety tips to ensure that you don't hurt yourself as you're cutting your lino. So maybe we'll just quickly have a look at some of those things now. So here you can see we've transferred our design onto our lino tile, and we also have some other tools over here to help us prepare. We've got a steel rule, we've got a pencil, just an HB pencil or a 2B pencil will be fine, and we've also got a sharp cutting knife, a hobby knife. So initially what we want to do is remove this surplus part of the tile. This particular part we'll use to practice some of our cutting, and if you like, also maybe practice your initial printing so that you can see how the process works and develop a little bit of skill prior to cutting and inking and printing your design tile. So let's maybe cut this side off. I guess it's pretty simple and easy to do. I'm simply going to place this straight edge along the marked line that indicates the edge of our design. As you can see, my fingertips are not overlapping the edge of our steel rule. You can use a wooden rule, but you can imagine it'll be very easy to cut into the ruler. So a steel rule might come in handy, or some kind of metal straight edge. I'm just holding the blade fairly horizontal to the lino tile. I'm not applying a great deal of pressure. The intent is, rather than having the blade upright and using a lot of force, it has to kind of tear and cut through a lot of lino there. It actually seems to slice through better if you've got a more acute angle. And of course, we're being careful to keep the blade horizontal. Probably the focus should really be more on your left hand in this instance, holding the metal rule straight so it doesn't move. Once you've got a groove happening, of course, it'll slide through with ease. On the back, we've got some jute hessian on the silk cut lino, and so you can imagine then that it might be easy just to take that blade through to cut off that excess side. Now let's mark this up, ready to do some test cutting. Here we've got some lines that we've made earlier. They can be handy just to test some of our cutting. So let's have a look at some of our lino cutting tools. More than likely, you'll find a 3 or a 5-piece set. Sometimes you can also purchase these tools as individual items. The cheaper ones usually come in a pack. The more expensive ones probably going to be purchased as individual lots. More about that one in a minute. But let's just initially have a look at the design of these tools. These two, you can see, have a V-shaped cutting tip. A larger one and a smaller one. They'll probably be the most commonly used and handy tools in your pack. Let's have a look at what else is in there. We also have some U-shaped gougers. Again, a smaller one and a larger one. We also have these chisel type tools. In this instance, we've got a cutting tip at 9 degrees to the rest of the tool. However, sometimes those cutting tips come at an angle. As you can see with this one here, it's a bit of a 45-degree angle. So here's our lino tile and our V-shaped tool. You can imagine, of course, if you go to cut, it's not really going to do a heck of a lot unless the lino tile is made stationary. So, of course, what you're likely to do is use your hand to hold the lino tile so that it doesn't move. But there's some cautions in doing that. You can imagine that if my lino tool falls or cuts away and slips across the lino tile, it very easily goes into my finger. So it's really important, if you're holding your lino tile, to keep your hand, of course, behind the cutting edge. Now, this blade is relatively sharp, given a little bit of a sharpen on a oil stone. You can imagine, in order for it to begin to work, what we have to do is have the tool at a certain angle. If it's too horizontal, if the angle is too acute, it's not going to dig into the lino tile. In order for that to happen, we probably have to elevate the tool so that we've got, say, something a little bit more like a 30 to 50 degree angle. At that point, applying a bit of pressure, you can imagine the tool's going to enter the top surface of the lino tile. But if we keep the same angle, of course, we're just going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. At some point, what we need to do is level off, depending on how wide we want that cut to be. So this is what your offcut is for, practicing these kinds of entering the lino and maneuvering the tool. Let's see if we can get a nice thin straight line, slowly tapering off. Or we might want to follow some of the marks that we've made. And you can see, as well as moving the tool, I'm also moving the tile to help with that. With this small piece of lino, you can see how common it is for my hand to shift in order to work out how to maneuver the tool. And you can see already how likely it is for this tool to end up cutting one of those digits. So a great idea might be to either make or purchase a bench hook. So here we have a bench hook, and it's just a flat board, in this instance just MDF, and it's got a piece of timber glued and nailed to one end, and at the other end, on the other side, we've got a couple of pieces also glued and nailed. These two pieces, of course, have an area cut away at 45. You can imagine that if I place my lino tile in here, I've always got some kind of resistance so that the lino tile is not moving simply because of the bench hook rather than the activity of my hand. That makes what happens with my hand less important, and I'm less likely then to cut myself. So have a look for a bench hook, although they are very easy to make, as you can see. Or you can also get non-slip mats. Sometimes you can get them from, dollar shops, etc., and they might be described as drawer liners, so that when you open your drawers, everything doesn't kind of move about. They can be handy too. You place them on your bench top or on your desk, and then place the lino tile on top. And because of the nature of the rubber, you've got some resistance, and it's less likely to slide across the surface as you're cutting. So let's go back to thinking about how these tools work. If, for instance, this side of that line, we want to cut an area away, you can see our V-shaped tool leaves all of these sharp ridges. Some of these ridges may actually pick up ink and leave marks where you hadn't intended when you're printing and inking. So some of these gouges might come in handy at this point. Let's use our large U-shaped gouge, and you can see very useful in cleaning up some of those areas to remove those ridges. I'd suggest, as you're getting ready to print, you do some proof prints in order to see what marks come up, because I think it's actually really useful to keep some of those little bits of graphic noise that happens through the process of cutting lino and later inking it. So why not just use your V-shaped tools initially to complete a lot of the cutting, then maybe ink up your block using a brayer, which we'll demonstrate later, in order to see which marks are useful in your design that happen as a result of the cutting process. Of course, through that proofing process, the marks that you don't like, you can just edit out. Grab your cutting tool and remove those ridges that are picking up ink in areas that do little to improve the design. As well as developing, I guess, some basic skills for cutting and cutting safely, it's a good idea maybe to see how these different tools will leave different kinds of marks. These marks will create patterns that might be useful in different ways as you're describing, textures, surfaces in your design. Let's see if we can make a nice thin line. So we're just going to enter the tile and then level off a little bit, and trying to keep the pressure and the angle and the speed relatively consistent allows us to make a rather thin line. Let's see if we can taper it off even further, retaining the same pressure, but modifying the angle just slightly so that we've got a different kind of cut. And again, let's see if we can do that by maneuvering the blade in the lino tile. What sort of marks can be made with these tools? This particular tool, you can see, is a little bit different. It's a little bit more expensive as a tool. It's got more of a bulbous end. That'll help if you're cutting for hours and you're applying some pressure with your hand, your palm. It also has a longer blade. Of course, this is going to be more expensive because of it has more metal, but equally, this is a high carbon steel, and so it'll hold its edge a whole lot better. The price difference is remarkable between a quality tool and a cheap tool. If you really get into your printmaking, in particular lino woodblock cutting, you might find that having a super sharp tool that doesn't get a dull edge is going to be really handy. So just keep an eye out to see what sorts of tools are available and what meets your budget and interests. But as you can imagine, this particular blade is going to cut through that lino rather easily, making the job more fun and also a lot more simple. I hope there were some useful tips in there for you as you're thinking about cutting into your lino and, of course, looking to do that safely. In our next video, we'll discuss registration. Registration involves using that same tile but printing from it with more than one colour on multiple occasions. So you can imagine our various colour separations have to superimpose each other quite perfectly in order for the image to turn out the way we want. So printers will refer to that as registration. So what we're going to do is make a little registration board that will help us with our printing so that our colours are aligned nicely. So stay tuned for that in our next video. Bye for now.